Punk Rock Elite, a podcast about NOFX. Well, looky here if it isn't another episode of Punk Rock Elite. Hello, I'm Eddie French and I'm here with Red Redmond.
Hello, that's me.
That is you. And we are doing the first of our NOFX full-length deep dives, which sounds very erotic if you ask me.
Yeah, so we're going to start today with Liberal Animation, their first studio album. I believe they released some EPs before this, but this is their first long play or LP.
They did. I like that. That's keeping it up for all of the Gen Z out there.
Yeah.
Nice one, Red. Red, our youth correspondent, is going to be explaining it.
Very big on the hit parade.
That was when they thought that this beat combo, NOFX, was going to be going places and going places fast.
So I'm really glad that we've been able to jump into this, an album that I hadn't previously listened to, which I apologize to any more hardcore fans than me out there, but it was actually much more enjoyable than expected, and I can't wait to get stuck into it.
Yeah, well, there you go. Early warning for the tone of this. It is going to be largely appreciative.
Yeah, because I did a little bit of research, and there are other people who have done, sort of like reviews and bits and pieces on Liberal Animation, and largely they are very critical. And that's not to say that we don't have criticisms of the album. I think that's very fair. I'm sure NOFX have criticisms of the album. But
yes,
there's something there in its essence. It is NOFX, and we love NOFX.
Yes, we love NOFX, and there is definitely a part of NOFX that exists within Liberal Animation, and that is worth exploring. The introduction, got to do all of this stuff. If you are enjoying this podcast, there's a fair few episodes out now. I mean, not compared to Comedy Bang Bang, who've just done 800, but, there's enough to work out what sort of a thing we're going for here. If you do like it, then tell people about it, share us around. If you're not subscribed, please do. Follow us on Instagram. That's where we put out choice morsels, possibly some less NOFX related content. Punk Rock Elite Podcast at gmail.com. That will, if you've got anything you want to send us or anything like that, then please do that. But as it is, I think we're just going to crash straight into this, aren't we? Hurtle headlong into Liberal Animation.
Absolutely, in the same way that NOFX did with studio recording, just straight through.
Absolutely. What we're going to do is, I can see it coming now. There's a music sting, Red. Grab onto it and we'll meet you in the main body. See you in a moment. Meow. Oh, gosh. Well, that's the only way to travel, if you ask me.
Absolutely. I am out of breath.
Well, we can have a sit down now, put us feet up, and have a good old chat about Liberal Animation. Let's just do a bit of housekeeping for it at the top. It was released on the 22nd of April. So not very far away from when this is going to be released, actually. So that's exciting. 1988.
Wow. I've just realised this album is older than me.
Yeah. It's easy to stop being friends with someone, Red. It's
not by much, I'll add. Not by much at all.
I know.
But I actually hadn't considered that. I don't know. In my mind, this would have come out in '92. But clearly, I've not been doing enough research.
No. This is 4 years older than you suspected. It was recorded between the 9th and 11th of January of 1988. So the turnaround was pretty quick. Not released on Fat Records, but was released on Wassail, which is another Fat Mike endeavor before Fat. So and distributed through Epitaph, produced by Brett Gurwitz of Bad Religion, and NOFX get a credit as well. Let's have a look at the album cover to begin with, if you're all in somewhere where you can look at the album cover. It does give away quite a lot of what the content of the lyrics are.
Yeah, a little bit, because there's quite an interesting anti-vegetarian vein that runs throughout this album. There's a lot of references to the militant vegans.
Seems to be militant vegetarians.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I mean,
vegans aren't mentioned at all, but
it was almost pre-vegan, I suppose. I'm not to say that there weren't vegans before 1990, but
that was a very sort of, I think that has gained. I mean, there would have been in the sort of the hardcore scene, but it seemed that maybe in Los Angeles it was all a bit more. California's a bit more hippie, so the sort of presence of vegetarianism would have been general as well as sort of, in the punk scene and stuff like that. So
and like, we're taking this all with a pinch of salt. My guess is that NOFX don't still feel as strongly against vegetarians as they did back in 1988. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if a couple of them are vegetarians now.
I think most of them have been at some point, and I believe Fat Mike has said that he eats 80% vegan diet, which I believe he said for health and ecological reasons, all of the reasons people give for veganism. He said, but 80% is for him. He feels that is a good balance of all that. This isn't a nutrition or an agricultural or ecological podcast, so whatever it is. So we can't really speak to any of that. I don't think either of us have done the research, but certainly 1988 Fat Mike felt very strongly about people who maybe were not necessarily people who didn't eat meat, but people who were vocal about not eating meat. Maybe that's what it is.
I wonder. Yeah, I agree. I wonder if I don't feel like it is a stance against vegetarianism, but rather a stance against a specific group of vegetarians who were probably hanging around the the punk scenes that he was involved in, and he didn't quite like their particular attitude. Like, there may have been some militant vegetarians, some militant hippies a part of the punk scene at the time, and I feel like it's a rant against them rather than the practice itself.
I feel that when Mike is singing these songs or having written these lyrics, I think there are definite specific individual people that are in his mind as he's doing it, rather than an entire concept. So it's probably that. But 1988, I don't know how. I mean, probably barely 20 at this point. They'd have still been very young, and when you are in, I think the thing is with a scene like punk, and that can be a scene anywhere, when you've got people who fervently believe a thing and still have that vital energy that comes from being young, very young, adolescent, your brain hasn't finished growing and changing, all the rest of it, you think in very black and white terms. So you're not someone who does this, you are a this.
I think
I'm not someone who eats vegetarian food. I'm not someone who maintains a vegetarian diet. I am a vegetarian.
And I think like that viewpoint has come through in our interview episodes recently, because I think whenever we've spoken to people who are a part of the punk scene, they tend to say that there was a time in their teens or early 20s where they were like, yes, I am a punk and this defines me and is who I am. But now they see themselves as, people with punk ethics.
Yes, people who love punk rock, people who are shaped by punk rock.
Yeah. And I think a lot of what I criticize liberal animation for is also kind of the reason why I love it. Because whilst they might be, it is almost the mindless music of a child in a way. That's why I enjoy it.
That's a remarkable review. The mindless music of a child. But you're absolutely right. There's a sort of a very appealing naivety not naivety, disregard for outside influence. I think because Brett Gerwitz of Bad Religion produced the first handful of NoFX albums, maybe just the first two, this one and S&M Airlines definitely. And on S&M Airlines, there's a lot of Bad Religion style harmonies, ahs and oohs and all the rest of it. And there isn't on this one. I don't know if he just thought, I don't think I can make them do this on this, or it didn't fit. But I think they did resist that sort of thing. Although it did mean that members of Bad Religion were brought in to actually do the harmonies on S&M Airlines and stuff like that. So maybe it was like, well, yeah, all right then. I'll do it if they do it. That is okay. There are bits in this where you can really see the influences that NoFX wear. Rich Kids on LSD. The opening track, Shut Up Already, has got that several types of introduction before the song starts, and it's still a really short song, but it is that. Okay, so we've got 6 riffs to start this song with, and 4 different time speeds, tempo speeds, and stuff like that, and then we get to the admittedly fairly underwhelming lyrical content, which is about 6 individual lines repeated a few times on Shut Up Already.
I think because this is one of maybe 2 tracks that I had previously heard on this album, because I believe this makes an appearance on their greatest hits. And it's it's a fine song, but I think one of the weaker points of this album, I would argue, is the vocals. I think the drums, the guitar, and the bass is not necessarily what I'd expect of NoFX, but I can certainly see where it's come from. But it's the vocals that I think show the greatest difference to modern NoFX.
Yes, Mike has said on several occasions that NoFX should win the award for most improved band. It's like, we're pretty good now. We used to be awful, just unforgivably bad, and I think he's exaggerating for fun, or I certainly feel like that's an exaggeration. He may well be genuine in how he feels about that. That's fine.
I think that you would struggle to find a band that has been around for as long that have improved as much. I kind of see what he's saying.
Absolutely.
Like it's how long would they have been together now?
Probably about
40. Oh, because it's 40.
It's 40 years they've been a band, and I think they started in 83. So it's 5 years before they released they specifically recorded a full-length album, because they did have they had a Maximum Rock and Roll, which was several EPs put together on one long play. So that was a compilation rather than a official studio release. So they've had 5 years from, hey, let's be a band, okay, go, and to getting in the studio and doing that, 4.5, 5 years. So
wow,
that's I don't know whether the band I was in after 5 years was better than this, but I think that the vocals are the weakest part. I think they're single tracked, and Mike's voice has yet to settle. Or like I say, he was about 20. My voice didn't settle down properly until I was about 22. I was, or 21. It was and I don't know what. And so he's not had any sort of training. He doesn't really know how to look after his voice. He's blowing it out on every song. So he must have. And remember, this was all done in 3 days, the recording.
Yeah, which is, really impressive. I mean, there's definitely a lot of like the Washington hardcore scene in here. I can hear bits of, Dead Kennedys. There's something that's very Fresh Fruit and Rotten Vegetables about this album. And particularly in the second track, Freedom, the intro just reminds me of Holiday in Cambodia. They've sort of got the Viet Cong intro.
Yes, it's there's all sorts of it is a sleeve wearing. I think NoFX have always been quite open about their influences, because they sort of have a series of bands. I mean, Mike certainly. It's difficult because with a band where one person contributes the majority, well, in fact, pretty much all of the songs in the form of the chord sequences, riffs, and sort of, melody and lyrics, it's very easy to overlook the contributions by the other members. So I realized that we've been doing that a lot in different recordings. It's sort of go, oh, well, Mike said, Mike does this, Mike does that, and all that stuff. All these others, they do all play it, and I'm absolutely certain that they will make suggestions or something. It's just natural the way it is. I don't think Mike walks in and goes, play this precisely that. The other sort of go, well, what if we did a little thing here? Go, oh yeah, okay, that's cool. Let's try that. I don't know, but I would find it odd if that had never happened. Hello everyone, Eddie here. Red and I hope you're enjoying our show. If you have been and would like to help us make it a little more easily, then you can donate to us at our Ko-fi page, which is ko-fi.com/punkrockelite, or you can look in the show notes for our link tree. If you can't help us financially, we totally understand, but would love it if you spread the word to other people who would like this podcast. We thank you for your continued support. We massively appreciate it. Back to the show.
Also, this album appears to be written slightly more communally than some of their other work. Like there is a lot of stuff that's just written by Eric Melvin or the guitarist they had at the time. I forget his name.
Dave Casillas.
Yeah, there's a lot of their compositions on this. There's a lot of lyrics by people who aren't Fat Mike on this.
Well, there's 8 of the 14 songs were written by Mike, and the others were written by Mike and Melvin, or Mike, Melvin, and Dave Casillas. Although the first Shut Up Already was Fat Mike and Dave Casillas and Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, which I don't think that we should breeze over that, because I do think it's quite interesting. The opening track of NOFX's first studio album breaks down from this sort of like Washington hardcore noise that you hear at the start of the track, but it breaks down into Black Dog by Led Zeppelin, a sort of like a parody of Black Dog by Led Zeppelin. And I think that really, it's such a precursor to what NOFX are going to be. They're going to be a hard and heavy punk band with a lot of humor. And I think that first track really sets that out.
Yes, I don't think that it's weird, because there's sort of, there's songs on here that sound like they're going to be humorous. And there's not really much humor on this because
vegetarian mumbo jumbo, right?
Well, I got crabs.
Yeah,
which is just him shouting, I need to itching in my balls, and it's like they get funnier. Everything you hear, every aspect, from the humor to the hardcore punk to the shifting tones within songs, and all of the musicianship improves immeasurably. But what you've actually got is quite... the vocals, again, one of the main problems people seem to have with NOFX is, I can't bear that guy's voice. And then they go and listen to Blink-182, and you go, okay. Yeah, like I've literally had that happen. And I don't have a problem with Tom DeLonge. Obviously, it's Tom DeLonge. Tom DeLonge's voice at all. He sings as he does. I don't think it's an affectation. I think he genuinely does make those noises, and that is natural to him. And I'd always rather hear someone sing the way they sing than have them imitate. I'm a big fan of Billy Bragg. Not winning any awards, but you believe him, which is worth a lot. An imperfect, honest voice, to me, is always better than a sort of a well-trained, pure voice that isn't saying anything at all.
Yeah, I agree.
Doesn't necessarily come into play with a lot of people. Some people just like music where they can hear all the words. And luckily for you can't on this album, so that's nice. But you can hear the conviction with which the words are said.
What are the highlights of the album for you?
It might be Shut Up Already, which I really like. Beer Bong.
Yeah.
I like a lot.
It's got a really good, like, driving, interesting rhythm to it, actually.
Yes, because it's got the bits where it's got the beer can opening and the burping and stuff.
And I think that's a really, again, another great precursor for understanding later NoFX, in that, you know, they are, even from the outset, using little studio tricks. You know, like, obviously, you know, production is a big part of Fat Mike's life. But it's interesting to see where it's all come from, and that they're already implementing little studio tricks this early into their recording career.
Yes. Later on, there'll be samples at the beginning of songs. There'll be,
Mm-hmm.
and all this kind of thing. Those little bits of texture, bits of flavor that go on. But Beer Bong was pretty much the only song I'd heard from this album, because it is on I Heard They Suck Live.
Right.
It's one of their nods to their very early stuff. So, yeah, Beer Bong I like. Mr. Jones I like. A lot of these songs I like musically, and sort of lyrically or even melodically aren't necessarily great. But I think Shut Up Already it really reminds me of RKL, and I like that a lot. The Rock and Roll Nightmare, it sounds like a sort of demo from that album, I think. To my ears, anyway. I think it does start stronger than it ends. Yeah, finishes the Truck Stop Blues, which isn't my cup of tea. Although I like it when it goes from the acoustic guitar into the heavy guitars. The tone on that is really, really good. But it's like metal production, kind of thrashy.
I think my biggest criticism of the album is I don't think it's all been mixed right. I think a lot of it has. I think the majority of it sounds great. The bits where I think it falls down is when they use acoustic guitars. It doesn't sit right in the mix, and it is like noticeably quieter than anything else. I was cooking some food in the kitchen whilst I was having a listen through one day. And I can't remember if it's Vegetarian Mumbo Jumbo or if it's Truck Stop Blues, but one of those was playing, and then it went. I had to like turn it up, like crank it really loud just to hear what was happening.
Yeah.
But then it went into some distorted guitar, which scared my pet rabbit. So
yes, Truck Stop Blues is the worst offender for that, I think. And also the sound they've got on the acoustic guitar isn't brilliant either. Like the whatever recording technique they've used, they've not mic'd
presumably on purpose as well.
I don't know. I think 3 days you get what you're given, don't you?
Because it reminded me of, like, do you know the tone to the acoustic guitar on "Fuck World Trade" by Leftover Crack?
Yes,
that sounds really dirty, but I think that's been mixed a lot better. And there's something of that here in, like, a guitar that is so dirty. I swear it's at least partly on purpose.
It's possible. It could be that if you do it wrong, or if you do it badly, you're somehow disrespecting the concept of acoustic music, and therefore still punking it is all right. I don't know. I don't want to sort of predict these things, but I think the fact that you've got 3 days to record 14 songs, I mean, from my own experience, I have a degree in music production. From having had to look at the history of recording, and also I'm interested in that kind of shit anyway. My best guess is that they would have recorded all of the music at once, not the acoustic guitars. They would have been put on afterwards as overdubs, maybe overdubbed the solos and stuff like that and the vocals, but 2 guitars, bass and drums would have been recorded at once in sort of separated spaces, which is great and gives a much more. I don't think there's any click tracks involved in this. I would be very surprised. You know, in some cases there hasn't been a tuner involved in it, so that's interesting too. But actually, no, everything's quite well in tune and intonated on this. But
I heard somewhere, I believe, in the Fat Records documentary, which is very good if people want to seek that out. I believe a lot of NoFX's early recordings, they do it in someone's bedroom closet.
Vocals, possibly.
I know it was guitar and vocals that they would do in in like a bedroom cupboard, because it
Possibly,
would
yeah.
slightly dampen the sound as opposed to just doing it in an open room.
If you would do that if you have a wardrobe or a closet full of t-shirts
Mm-hmm.
hanging up. If you sing into that, it's not going to reflect back at you. The echo is not going to bounce, so you're going to get quite a dry, clear signal, and then ironically you go and put some controlled reverb on it to make it sound like you're in a lovely echoey room, but the right kind of echoey room. I remember when back recording a band in the olden days, you see, we would often put a duvet over the microphone and guitar cabinet that we'd mic'd up, drape a duvet over, so we'd just get that close mic'd thing and not the rest of the room, because it might not be appropriate, especially for like heavier guitars and stuff you want to chug.
What tog of duvet would you recommend?
I don't know. It was my friend Andy Caesar. It was his duvet because he lived in the halls. This was on campus. He lived in the halls closer to the recording studio on campus, so he had to go and use his. Hardly, but it was, but it worked. It worked really well. I don't know what tog it was. I think it was summer, so it wasn't a very thick one. There's a million and one tricks for recording, none of which we used in this, because, like I say, 3 days. The first day, I imagine that had just been setting up, doing mic placements, and getting all of that sorted. And then the second day, they probably just played through as many of them as they could, and then the third day would have been overdubs and vocals.
Absolutely. And I think, like, obviously we understand that NOFX are sadly going to stop performing live.
Yes.
But my understanding is that they are going to continue to record bits and pieces, potentially studio albums, etc.
Yes.
And if I had one wish for the next few years with regards to NOFX, I would love for them to revisit this album and re-record it as the artists that they are now. Not necessarily changing it, but just, they've improved so much as musicians. I would love to hear this stuff again, but better.
Yeah. Yes, that's an interesting thought, isn't it? Or we could just get Ryan Adams to just record what he thinks it should have been, so that Muso nerd virgins can go, oh, well, to be fair, actually, the song crafting is a bit better, actually.
I might be going to see Ryan Adams next month.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm thinking about it. He's doing a little tour, like a sit down. I think he's doing like Palace Theatre in Manchester, which is a strange venue. I don't know why the fuck he's doing there. That's so odd. Anyway, but he's doing the Barbican in York, very close to my birthday, so I might go and see that.
Let's talk about liberal animation some more.
Absolutely. Now, what are your other highlights of the album? Because I really enjoy "I Live in a Cake."
Yes, again, musically, I like that, and I also, it's nice to have a song that I have absolutely no idea what it could mean. Because a lot of Mike's songs, when you find out about like songs like "I'm Telling Tim" is one of my favorites from Song and Thanks for All the Shoes, and it's about the guy who started the Maximum Rock and Roll zine.
Yeah,
I think Tim Yohannan, possibly. Don't know his surname. And I think in another song he mentioned something like, there's a line that says, "I don't miss something, I do miss my old friend Tim." And it's like, if you're not punk enough, I will tell Tim on you. And it's this silly song, but musically I love it, and it just the melody's great and all that stuff. You can find out what that means by going, or when you hear a song, you go, I don't know who he's talking about. It's probably someone from the 1980s Californian, LA, San Francisco punk scene that you just don't know about yet. And you go, oh, okay, well, I'll enjoy that as a story. But "I Live in a Cake." I know, was there some famous hardcore guy who lived in a cake for a while?
Well,
I don't know.
It makes me think of the Brass Eye episode about drugs. The
Yes.
Chris Morris black comedy where they introduced there's a new drug on the streets called cake. Yeah. And the production team very cleverly got a lot of real life celebrities to do these anti-drugs sort of like videos, instructional videos
like
about this
PSAs,
fake drug.
yeah, like public service announcements of if anyone comes up to you and suggests, and then they come up with a load of like nicknames for it and stuff like that, and yeah, and also they give them a sample of the drug, and it's the size of a quiche. It's like it's like this enormous pill with like the split down the middle, this big yellow pill,
and you have like Wolf from Gladiators advertising it, and all these people, and that's what shoots into my mind when I hear Fat Mike sing "I Live in a Cake." I think he's trapped. I think
"sing" is a very generous term for that particular. I live
Very
in a
true.
cake. I think that one was recorded towards the end of the day. Do you know what I mean? You can hear the ones that were recorded in the morning. But yeah, so Mike trapped mime-like in a large yellow pill.
Absolutely. And now also, we can't talk about the highlights of the album without talking about the lowlights of the album.
That's true. That's only fair.
I think On the Rag is one of NOFX's worst songs.
I think it is. Yeah.
I'm sure they'd agree.
It's it's sort of yeah, stop yelling at me. It's a bit sort of there's not much to it. Musically, it's sort of fairly forgettable, and yeah, I don't know if you're right. I mean, I don't rate Truck Stop Blues particularly highly.
Yeah, me neither.
But that is partly due to the vocals, which just sound like a tired boy, don't they?
Yeah. And a lot of these songs much shorter than at least their later work. I suppose you've got a couple tracks over 3 minutes in here.
Yes.
But a lot of things under 2 minutes. It's sort of, it reminds me of Minor Threat's discography in the, it's sort of like get in, get out, heavy Washington hardcore.
Yes, absolutely. I think there's a lot to be said for songs doing everything they can, everything that needs to be done in a short time.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of been it's been one of the hallmarks of punk rock, I suppose. Not necessarily punk as an art movement, but as a musical genre. It's sort of you don't have to worry about, putting in this, that, here. You just everything that needs to be done has already been done, and next thing now. And I like that as a thing because, contrary to what it may sound like, I like things when they're succinct and clear. Unfortunately, to get to that, I have to speak for a very long time, which is annoying.
And that's not to say that they don't embellish in moments. I mean, there's some genuinely impressive musicality in this, which I think is what pushes it into being a quite good album. And there's, like songs like Mr. Jones, the guitar work on that is brilliant. And it almost reminds me of like Guns N' Roses' Mr. Brownstone. I don't know why it does, but there's.
I think they're about the same thing.
Oh yeah, heroin.
I think they're both about heroin. So yeah, that's my theory.
But I'm genuinely impressed because obviously, like, there's shorter songs and some of it's like quite succinct, but they do know how to play their instruments even at this stage in their career. And again, to hear an album without Hefe, but it still has good guitar, is impressive.
Well, it's a very metal influence on the guitars, a lot of sort of tapping solos. So it sort of sounds, it's got that, Metallica-y kind of sound on it. Apparently there are videos for Shut Up Already and Mr. Jones.
Yeah, that's intriguing.
I've not watched them. I might have done a long time ago, but I didn't go and look at them for this. It was released on Epitaph in 1991, but they released it through Wassail before. So this would have technically had
the whole album or just these?
The whole album.
Oh, okay.
So they released it themselves through Wassail in 1988, and here they Epitaph re-released it in 1991 with different artwork.
Oh, okay. Now, so is the artwork that we're seeing, is that from the original release, or is that the Epitaph release, do you think?
That is a good question. It could be.
Because obviously anything that I've looked at is saying that this album was released in 1988, so presumably that would be the artwork from 1988.
Just having a look here. Oh no, very different. Yeah, we're looking at the epitaph artwork.
Right, yeah,
If you write
yeah.
Wassail artwork, it's sort of black with the NoFX logo at the top in
Oh,
yellow.
and it's got the red sort of. Yeah, no, it's very different, isn't it? It's very very different.
It's got sort of a musical note roller coaster thing. When I say the death metal thing, I'm talking. It's got sort of weird embellishment. It's got this weird sort of livery embellishment around the side. It's and then like something that looks like the scream in the middle.
It's very unusual for NoFX, but certainly not unusual for bands of this genre.
I think I don't know. It's interesting because if you listen to that album with that image in your mind instead of the cow family eating a roast human,
yeah, right.
how would that impact? The first bite is with the eye. How would that have impacted it? Because I can't imagine how. Because
well, it would almost like this artwork, which is obviously not the most famous artwork with the cartoon cows eating the purpose, but this new artwork, which is a lot more like abstract, darker, just reds, blacks, and whites. It almost would give the album a more serious edge. I mean, we've been listening to these songs as if they're sort of like, partly comedy songs.
Yeah, lighthearted in tone and stuff. Around that time, what punk rock art was like, which was quite often sort of found imagery.
Yeah.
Or sort of graffiti stuff. They knew someone who's a tattooist and like, can you draw something sick for our cover?
I wonder if NoFX had to pay any rights for including a section of Black Dog in their opening track. There's no mention of it.
No. I don't know, to be honest. I think there are... I don't know what the copyright laws and stuff like that are in the US. If it's sort of a little sample, I think you're probably okay. But I couldn't tell you really. If it was a full cover, they'd have had to have gone through whoever owned the rights to it would have had to have okayed it or what have you. But I mean, if they'd have just played the whole song with that riff but sung different words, that would have been one thing. But
yeah.
I mean, because the thing is, in My Baby Is a Head Fuck by Wild Hearts, the Wild Hearts have got a bit of Day Tripper by the Beatles in that song. It's just in the middle there, and I don't know how one goes about dealing with it. And that was released on a label. I don't know, independent or what, but you'd have had to have got in touch with someone. This is wild speculation. The Liberal Animation, it's 14 songs. It's 29 and a half minutes long. Would you recommend it?
I would if you're a fan of NoFX, particularly if you're into their later stuff and you want an idea of where they came from. I think it's fantastic. But if you aren't a fan of NoFX, I don't think this is going to change your opinion.
Unless you think NoFX are a bit too polished and poppy these days. In which case, who knows? You might, I mean, there's always one person who thinks that the first album's the best one, and everything that came after that is post-core shit. So,
yeah. In that case, Eddie,
yeah,
would you recommend Liberal Animation to someone else?
It's hard not to parrot your answer. I think for a NoFX fan, at worst, Liberal Animation is a sort of historic curiosity.
Yeah.
At worst, for someone who doesn't like NoFX, it is evidence of what they've been saying all along. So, the most common or biggest criticisms leveled at NoFX, even to this day, are here in quite sharp relief. Like I say, I don't mind a few rough edges on music I listen to. In many cases, I prefer it if that's an authentic thing. And I do think that this record is authentic.
Yeah.
I think they're trying to sound like certain bands, but, that's just what bands are like. Very few bands, very few artists have got a sort of a unique sound in their own head that they're trying to create. Some do. I would be surprised if there are many bands who are genuinely 100% feel like they want to disown parts of their own recorded history, because it is a record is always a document of where a band are at that time.
Yeah.
And this is what NOFX were in 1988. So you can only say, well, I'm glad they got better, or I'm so sad they sold out, or whatever it is, but you can only really take it as a document.
I think it's impressive as well when you consider like how much of music this predates. I mean, this is arguably pre-grunge.
Absolutely is.
Not to say that they've that they've invented grunge before it happened. Right? I'm not saying that at all. But I think that it's really interesting, to put them in a historical context, that this album comes before Nirvana's Nevermind, which, did inarguably change, rock music as we know it. Absolutely. So I think quite impressive that this predates all of that.
Well, yeah, Nirvana were the punk band that made it.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because when people sort of talk about other grunge acts, they didn't really sound like Nirvana. The ones that people talk about, like Soundgarden and Pearl Jam and the other bands that get sort of mentioned, they don't really sound much like each other.
But also like pop punk, like in my mind, I always think of like, pop punk and hardcore as something that came after. I mean, I've always known that, like the hardcore scene in the 80s obviously predates Nirvana and everything, but I don't know, it still doesn't fit right in my mind. There's something about it that feels odd, like the timings of it all.
I think that because when a lot of hardcore bands in the 80s, they crossed over, that was, they started playing essentially thrash.
Yeah.
So they sounded a lot more like Rain in Blood by Slayer than they did Frankenchrist by by Dead Kennedys or whatever. People got interested in underground music when Nirvana, Kurt Cobain was still wearing homemade Flipper t-shirts on Saturday Night Live or whatever TV shows they were on, that always spoke about the underground.
Well, they always saw themselves as kind of a hardcore punk band. Kurt would just argue that he knew how to write hooks.
I mean, they were a punk rock band. That was where they all came from. That was the scene that they felt comfortable in. But they were also like, up in Seattle, which is a bit rainier. They were same coast as LA and all that stuff, but without the sunshine, and the weather was a bit more British. So things were a bit less. That's the only way I can understand weather. So things were a bit more like that. But then they were talking about all of the underground bands, or just non-mainstream bands that they liked, and that's when people started scouring the underground, particularly record companies. Same when Green Day had, were suddenly everywhere, or Offspring were everywhere.
Also, please do let us know if you've listened to Liberal Animation, you've got some thoughts on it, maybe something that we missed, maybe a little fun fact that we're unaware of. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the album. I've really enjoyed listening to this, and I can't wait to get stuck into the rest of their back catalogue, because I think I've actually, like, looking at the size of it, I think I've listened to an embarrassingly short amount of it. I don't think I've really listened to anything before The Longest Line.
Oh, you're only used to the Hefe output.
I think I might be, yeah.
It's interesting. Because again, I think all of NoFX's non-Melvin guitarists have all been more metal than they have punk. They've all been more interested in metal. Because Hefe had no real knowledge of punk rock when he joined. Dave Casillas does a great job on this record, the stuff. And I also like that some of the solos are slightly sloppy and out of time, because I admire that.
So do you think this is going to work its way into your record rotation? Are you going to listen to this a little bit more?
I probably won't. But I think Shut Up Already would make it onto a mix, onto a playlist, and maybe Mr. Jones as well. They'd be on two separate ones. I wouldn't double load it. But
Don't forget, I live in a cake.
How could I? That's true. I think I like it for what it is, and I think if I listen too much to it, I don't think it would have the same impact. But there's a couple of little standout moments on here. But to say everything on here is a solid gold banger would be, I think, it wouldn't be my truth. To be generous. How about yourself?
Yeah. I would. I think I'm going to have to parrot your answer. I think that, I'm glad that I've listened to it. I'm very, very glad that I've listened to it. There are a few standout tracks on it, similar to you. Shut Up Already, Mr. Jones. I think A Living a Cake good. I think Beer Bong's good.
Yeah, Beer Bong's good.
I think the general vibe of it is very enjoyable. But I don't think that I'm going to listen to this in full anytime soon.
No. Well, the next one we do will be S&M Airlines.
Exciting.
Yes. Again, not one that I've listened to a huge amount, but I think I know more songs on it. I'm not going to look at it now, but I'm confident I'm familiar with more songs on S&M Airlines than I was with Liberal Animation. For those playing along at home, we think we're going to try and aim for an interview episode every other week, and then one where Red and I either go through an album, or we might do some more trivia things, or look at a particular aspect.
Or if you have any suggestions, let us know.
Absolutely. If you've got any questions, comments, your own memories of NOFX, things that you love about them, things that maybe you think people should know, or that you think people overlook, please do. punkrockelitepodcast@gmail.com, or give us a shout in the comments on Instagram. We'll see all of that. Thank you for listening. This has been Punk Rock Elite. So thank you ever so much. Follow us on Instagram. Have a look at the posts we put up, because we'll be doing stuff for other people. We may even start, I know now Bandcamp allow you to make playlists on Bandcamp. So if you're interested in what we've been listening to, we might start putting a Bandcamp playlist together each week or every couple of weeks, and put that in our link tree, which you can find in the description. Or if you've got anyone that you think we should be putting into our Bandcamp playlist, let us know. And it means you can go and buy the song if you particularly like it directly from the artist, which is more useful than Spotify for the artists. And as we've got coming up soon, we're going to be looking to be a bit more grassroots about this, and encourage grassroots venues, grassroots bands, promoters, and companies that help artists from the ground up.
Ace.
So if you're connected to any of those, do get in touch. Well, thank you ever so much, Red. It's always a pleasure talking to you, my dear.
Always a pleasure talking to you as well, Eddie. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, of course. We'll see you all later on Punk Rock Elite.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you for listening to Punk Rock Elite. It was a Pick Scraped and Fruitcake co-production by Eddie French and Red Redmond. If you're not following us on Instagram or subscribed to the podcast, please do. The main theme and production was done by Eddie French. Please contact us at punkrockelitepodcast@gmail.com. Thank you.